Will the Bucs be able to shake their draft criticism this season? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credential member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. For that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Funny enough, Rashad White posted a somewhat cryptic message on Instagram that relates to something that we talked about earlier this week, and the Bucs have one of the toughest stretches in the NFL this season. That is all coming up in a little bit. We're going to start things off with some more fallout from the NFL draft and how, at least to me, it appears the Bucs are going to be fodder for plenty of criticism over the coming months. So, Bleacher Report's Alex Ballantyne went through and named every NFL team's top roster needs, trade assets, and cap space following the NFL draft last month. And for the Bucs, he lists their 5 biggest needs as edge rusher, linebacker, guard, safety, and interior defensive line depth. Trade assets, he says it's Jamel Dean, Rashad White, and Sterling Shepard. Then finally, he gets into the Bucs draft choices and how that affects their top needs. Ballantyne says, quote, "It's hard to criticize the Buccaneers for taking Emeka Egbuka in the first round. He's a polished prospect with a high floor and a long track record of production at wide receiver factory Ohio State. The Bucs didn't necessarily need a receiver after re-signing Chris Godwin this offseason. While going the best player available route has merit, there is a cost-benefit analysis to be done with each pick. In this case, building on a strength cost the Bucs the opportunity to cross a need off their list. Specifically, the Bucs didn't come away from the draft with a promising pass rusher or a linebacker to pair with and eventually replace Levante David. Both would have made it easier to feel good about the future of Todd Bowles' defense. They did, however, get aggressive in addressing the cornerback position by doubling up and taking Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish in the second and third rounds, respectively." End quote. So he says that it's hard to criticize the Bucs for taking Emeka Egbuka in the first round, then proceeds to criticize them for taking Emeka Egbuka in the first round, albeit indirectly. He goes on to talk about the cost-benefit analysis of taking the best player available instead of addressing a need, and knocks them for not coming away from the draft with a promising pass rusher or a linebacker. First off, they did get a promising pass rusher in David Walker, who was top 10 among all pass rushers on PFF the last 3 years. I would say that's pretty promising. And if he had the level of production that he did at Central Arkansas at a Power 5 school instead, then he would have gone in the first round. And before you start yelling at me, yes, I am fully aware that there's an obvious chance that his skills don't translate and he doesn't find consistent success or become a starter because of the drastic change in the level of competition. But that's not what Ballantyne said. He said promising, not sure thing. I will put David Walker firmly in the promising camp, and I will die on that hill. Then the Bucs obviously didn't like this linebacker class. A lot of teams didn't. I was a lot higher on them, as were a lot of draft analysts, than the actual teams were. That was one of the big takeaways when everything was over. The Bucs seemed ready to roll with Levante, Anthony Walker, Deion Jones, and Servassier Dennis. And I think Servassier's health is going to be a big factor in whether or not the Bucs made the right decision. If he's healthy all season, it'll basically be like the Bucs got a new player anyway, considering how little he's actually been able to play since he was drafted because of lingering injuries. As for the needs, the Bucs got Hassan Reddick and Yaya Diaby. They re-signed Anthony Nelson. You have Chris Braswell and the promising edge rusher in David Walker as part of the rotation. You still have Jose Ramirez and Marquise Watts. They could have a pretty solid edge rush rotation. Linebacker, I just talked about that. Guard, they re-signed Ben Bredesen. You still have Cody Mauch. At depth, you have Elijah Klein, who they just drafted last year, and you're bringing back Sua Opeta, who returned and was supposed to compete for the starting job with Bredesen last year. So you still have depth there. Safety, I get it. All right, we talked a lot about safeties heading into the draft. Antoine and Tyke are your guys there at the top. Christian Izien is going to be depth regardless of whether or not he starts at nickel, because you have Parrish who can step in at nickel if Izien has to slide back to a safety spot. Kayvon Merriweather has gotten better. Marcus Banks is young and brings some skill. Rashad Wisdom was the training camp star last year. He might see more opportunities this season. Probably going to see Shiloh Sanders on the practice squad. And then defensive line depth, okay, fine, whatever. So I'm not sure I fully buy into Ballantyne's team needs, but when you're listing 5 positions for every single team and the Bucs have a really solid roster to begin with, you start splitting hairs to find those 5 positions. My big takeaway, though, from all of this is whether or not Jason Light and the Bucs are going to keep getting dogged all year for taking a receiver in the first round, especially when that receiver is a 4th option. You guys know I was shocked when it happened. There were other players at other positions that I felt would have or could have been the pick, but that takes us back to the kinds of people the Buccaneers draft. I did an entire show about this. Jahad Campbell was not going to be on the draft board. There were medical concerns there. James Pierce wasn't going to be on the draft board. Mike Green was not going to be on the draft board. Other than that, maybe Jahdae Barron or Malachi Starks, but then you wind up with Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish at corner on day 2. So you really can't knock the Bucs letting Barron slide past them, considering the receivers that would have been available in the second round at their pick. Say what you will about Barron's skills. He's a fantastic corner, but I'm taking the combination of Egbuka and Morrison over Barron and Trey Harris or Barron and Jack Beck any day of the week and twice on Sundays or the occasional Thursday or Monday. That's what I think people are overlooking when it comes to this selection. Egbuka is an absolute stud. Morrison and Parrish are studs. When you look at the collective of this draft class, I'm not sure you get a collection of talent this good by rearranging the positions that were taken into different rounds. I just pointed out the wide receiver cornerback combo that they got with the first 2 picks. You aren't going to find a better combo if you flip those positions and mix them with the players that were available at the Buccaneers pick. The same could be said when you take a look at David Walker and Elijah Roberts, which were their first 2 picks on day 3. I mean, would you rather the Bucs took Tonka Hemingway over Walker and then Colin Oliver over Roberts? Because those were the next players taken at those positions after the Bucs made their selections. The Bucs are still going to face criticism for their selection of Egbuka, and I'm sure more than enough is going to come from within the Bucs' own fan base. And if Dennis or Walker get cooked by some tight end, or, the edge rushers combined for no sacks in week 1 while Egbuka doesn't get a single target, it's only going to get worse. That's going to be the problem. The fact that Egbuka isn't going to be a starter in week 1 and will have limited opportunities will only exacerbate the issue for people that didn't like the pick or believed that the Bucs wasted it on a luxury. But I'm telling you, sooner than later, Bucs fans are going to love Egbuka, and they're going to see what Jason and Todd and Grizz all saw in him and why they wanted him so bad, especially if the injury bug hits the receiving room again. Like all things in life that are good, you've just got to be patient. Let it play out and trust one of the best drafting teams of the last 5+ years, and trust that they did another solid job. It doesn't have to happen in week one. Let this thing play out a little bit. One of the toughest stretches in the NFL belongs to the Buccaneers. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart but win big. Tyrese Halliburton pulled off his late-game heroics again, while the Thunder have jumped out to a 2-0 lead on the Timberwolves quickly, making some wonder if the real Western Conference Finals was indeed the Thunder against the Nuggets. But it's not over yet. The Thunder are still the overwhelming favorites to win the NBA Finals at -340, followed by the Indiana Pacers at +600, the New York Knicks at +650, and those poor Minnesota Timberwolves all the way at +2400. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so Fox Sports dropped their top 10 most difficult stretches of the 2025 season, and the headliner was the Dallas Cowboys, who have a 4-game stretch where they host the Eagles, host the Chiefs, head to Detroit to face the Lions, and then they're back home to take on the Vikings. That was deemed the toughest 4-game stretch in the NFL this year. Minnesota came in at number 2, Cleveland at 3, Baltimore at 4, Pittsburgh at 5, Cincinnati at 6. I think the AFC North has a tough schedule this year. Buffalo was 7, the Giants were 8, Bears were 9, and then at number 10 was the Buccaneers in weeks 4 through 7, where they are going to host the Eagles, travel to Seattle, host the Niners, and then travel to Detroit. For those that remember my schedule reaction show, I pointed to this as one of the toughest stretches on the Bucs schedule, but I didn't name it the toughest, but I understand why Fox did. You're talking about the defending champs, a team that had Super Bowl buzz last year after losing the NFC Championship in the 2023 season, the team that beat them in the NFC Championship on their way to the Super Bowl, and then they had a down year because of injuries, and then a team in Seattle that I'm still not really sure what to make of, but that trip alone is a tough one, and the environment with the 12th man is absolutely unreal. This is a stretch where the Bucs are going to have to go at least 2-2. If you can't come out of this at 2-2, then you're going to have a real tough time climbing back to the top of the division. Let's not forget that the Bucs open on the road in Atlanta, then on the road with Houston in primetime before hosting the New York Jets. That's not exactly screaming a 3-0 start. I think it certainly could be a 3-0 start, but it won't be easy. If you start 2-1 and then you don't go 2-2 over this stretch that Fox is talking about, then you're under 500 with more gauntlets left. There is no easy stretch like there was last year to gain ground. After the Lions, you get the Saints and the Patriots. Okay, fine, whatever. But then it's at Buffalo and at the Rams in primetime. After that, Cardinals, Saints, all right, cool. Then the Falcons at Carolina, at Miami, and then Carolina again. This is far from last year when the Bucs had a final stretch of the Giants, Panthers, Raiders, Chargers, Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. There are no lulls in this schedule this time around. There is no reprieve. So even though I may not necessarily think that weeks 4 through 7 is the actual toughest stretch, it is a stretch that can make or break the season before we even hit Halloween. After the Lions game, at best, I could see the Bucs going 7-3. And that's if everyone is healthy, which we know they won't be, and if the Bucs are at the top of their game. But things happen, mistakes happen. Games don't go the way you plan, and they aren't going to run the table 10 straight weeks. I don't think they win in Buffalo. It's going to be really hard to win in LA. Then you have 4 divisional games. Like, for those, all bets are off. They're divisional games. The Panthers nearly beat the Bucs last year. The Saints put up a fight, against the Bucs last year. So heading into week 8, sitting at 3-4 or worse is a real bad draw. Now, again, if the Bucs are playing their best and they're at the level that they should be, then they can get through that 4-game stretch 3-1. Despite how tough it is to travel and play in Seattle, they are the far superior team to the Seahawks. The Niners, I'm not sure what they're going to be, but they always play the Bucs tough, and a potentially healthy Christian McCaffrey changes the entire landscape of the game. The Eagles are stacked top to bottom. That is the best roster top to bottom in the league. The Bucs can and have beaten them, but it's not going to be an easy game. It's the same thing with Detroit. They have weapons on weapons on weapons for Jared Goff, and their defense is next level. Don't forget what Aiden Hutchinson was able to do to the Bucs last year. I get that was a win for the Bucs, but Hutchinson was living in the backfield, making life miserable for Baker Mayfield. The big question to me for the Lions is, are the coordinators going to step up after they lost both their offensive and defensive coordinators last year to head coaching jobs? Like, are their replacements going to be able to maintain that same level of success that the Lions have had the last couple of years? That's the biggest question mark. So I'm not going to sit here and knock the order of Fox Sports list. I don't care about that. I really, truly don't. You can nitpick that entire list apart and you can move things around. At the end of the day, this is still one of the toughest stretches in the NFL this season. And what I do care about is what the Bucs do over that 4-game span. Because if they're caught sleeping or slipping and they come out of that stretch at 1-3, or, worst case scenario, 0-4, then the season might be over before it's even halfway done. And that's going to lead to a lot of questions about what this roster is going to look like next year and whether or not the Bucs decide to just blow most of it up. I wouldn't think that Jason Light and Todd Bowles and the rest of that staff would overreact to that magnitude, but they're going to owe a lot of players a lot of money. And there's going to be some tough questions asked inside that building as to whether or not it's going to be worth it to bring some of these guys back when they failed in that stretch the season before, setting up the rest of the season to be really, really difficult, or end up missing the playoffs because you fell so far behind the 8 ball that you couldn't get caught back up. At that point, I know nobody wants to say it. I don't want to say it. I might throw open my mouth a little bit as the words are coming out. But do you let Mike Evans walk and go to a contender to potentially win one more ring before he leaves? I realize that he's the ultimate Buccaneer. He is still, in my opinion, the greatest Buccaneer of all time. And I realize to some of you that's going to be blasphemous, whether it's because you have Brooks there or Rondé there or Leroy there or whoever. But to me, Mike Evans is the epitome of what it is to be a Buccaneer. But do you let him go? Because now you have to make those decisions of, well, do we bring back, Zion McCollum? Do we bring back Cade Otton? Do we bring back Rashad? What's a Baker extension going to look like? You start asking all of these questions. And if you go through that stretch and it torpedoes the rest of the year, when you were supposed to be a team that should have been contending, not just in the playoffs, but contending to get to or play in the conference championship, potentially even the Super Bowl, and then you lay an egg, there's going to be wholesale changes. Whether that's to the roster, the coaching staff, or both, there will be wholesale changes. This team is built to win now. You cannot afford to let that 4-game stretch that early in the season derail championship aspirations. Did Rashad White listen to this show earlier this week and send us a message? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Back on Tuesday's show, I did a big feature on Rashad White and his interview with RG Media. Then we talked about some reasonable expectations for Rashad this season and what it means for him entering a contract year. One of the things that I really harped on was whether or not he would return to the Bucs and whether it would be worth it to him to likely take less money than he would probably get on the open market and stay, or whether or not he would hit free agency and try to maximize his earnings in what, on average for running backs in the NFL, would be his best opportunity to actually cash in. I had some people in the YouTube comments saying that there was no doubt in their minds that he stays. Some said there was no doubt in their minds that he leaves. And some said that they just flat out didn't want him back, which, quite frankly, I don't understand that take at all, because Rashad White is an incredibly valuable member of this roster. All that said, maybe Rashad White also listened to the show and decided to send us a little message via Instagram to let us know where his mind was. So Rashad posted on his Instagram story a picture of Baker Mayfield with the caption, "One last horse emoji, cowboy emoji," which I interpreted as "one last ride, cowboy." For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see what I'm talking about. I have the picture posted. Now, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's some sort of like inside joke or personal reference between the two of them that we're all reading way too much into. But this screams that Rashad already has one foot out the door. Remember, Tristan Wirfs was on, I think it was on The Pivot, where he was talking about how his best friend, Robert Hainsey, had told all of the offensive linemen way back in training camp that this was his last season with the Buccaneers and that he was going to leave in free agency, that he knew he could be a starting center in the league, and the Bucs drafting Graham Barton, he realized that it wasn't going to be a starting job here in Tampa. So this could be a similar mindset from Rashad, that he knows that the Bucs have Bucky. Skip Pete, the running backs coach, already came out and said Bucky is the RB1. Rashad's going to have his role, but Bucky is the number one guy. So Rashad knows going into the season that his opportunities are going to be limited. So he could already have his mind made up that he's going to leave to go try to be the lead back somewhere else. My concern is this. If he already has one foot out the door, is it going to affect his play? Now, I would hope not for a couple of reasons, but conventional wisdom would tell you that since it's a contract year, he's going to want to ball out so that he can go make that money on the open market. If he goes into the season with a very lackadaisical attitude and doesn't give it his all and isn't actually putting in the work and, very evidently doesn't care, that's going to show up on the tape, and he's going to be hurting his prospects for free agency. At the same time, maybe he isn't as aggressive as he normally would have been. We talk about guys running out of bounds early or not fighting for those extra yards, or going down when they probably could have kept running a little bit. And oftentimes it's referred to as a business decision. So you might see a couple of business decisions in Rashad's game this season. I hope not, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. And look, I have had the pleasure of speaking with Rashad a few times, and he's absolutely fantastic. He's an incredibly kind person, wonderful to chat with. He was on this show with his daughter as a rookie. He has never come across as anything other than a consummate professional and a genuinely kind person. And I believe that when push comes to shove, he's going to go out there and he's going to do his job the way that he has the last 3 seasons. At the same time, he's human. We all make decisions that are in our own personal best interest or the best interest of our families. And sometimes that doesn't exactly align with the expectations or the interests of those around us. I'll say it again now and probably 100 more times before March of next year. I'm never, ever, ever going to fault a guy for going out and getting paid. I've left jobs to go out and get a different job for more money, although I did learn the hard way that sometimes a little bit more money doesn't necessarily result in a happier life or a better job, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm sure all of you have left jobs in your past for more money or better opportunities. That's the way the world works. That's how we continue to strive to be better for ourselves, have better lives, provide for our kids better, give them, that old thing, I want them to have what I didn't have, and so on and so forth. So if that's what he's going to do, then I hope he makes the right decision. I hope he gets paid. I hope he finds a place where he's happy. But I don't want to have to look back at this post or this episode because he mentally checked out too early and it's hurting the team in the meantime. I don't want that to be a conversation throughout the season. And again, I'm not going into this thinking that that's who Rashad is going to be, that he is going to intentionally just not care. I'm not predicting that he's going to get to a point where he rips off his pads and his uniform on the sideline in the, second quarter, runs off the field, never to be seen again. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is if he's already made up his mind that this is his last season with the Buccaneers, I hope he still shows the same level of dedication and the same level of consistency and plays up to his ability the way he did the first 3 years. Because not only is it going to help the team as they try to go win a championship, because that's what they're built to do right now, but again, it's going to help him make that money that he wants on the open market. If he wants a chance to go out somewhere and be the lead running back, there's going to be opportunities for that. There's going to be teams that need a lead back. I could see him going to Jacksonville, playing for Liam Cohen again. I could see him, he wouldn't have the opportunity to be the lead back in Carolina because they have 86 running backs on their roster. But there's going to be a chance right down the road for me. The Cincinnati Bengals, they need running back help. As much as I love my, my Illini brethren, Donald Brown, or Chase Brown. I'm sorry, Donald Brown. Wow, that's a blast from the past. But, Chase Brown down there in Cincinnati, he needs help. And he's not exactly built to be a 3-down back. Rashad getting to go into that offense, pick up blitzes to protect Burrow, catch passes from Burrow out of the backfield, give Burrow a little bit of a security blanket there. That could take Cincinnati to the next level. There will be chances for him out there. I just want to emphasize that it's crucial. If Rashad wants to leave and wants to get his bag, the best way to do that is to help the Buccaneers this season. Be with the team, be in the moment, have your head on straight, and focus on what you have to do, because when Rashad's on his game, he's phenomenal. So if we only get one more year where Rashad White is suiting up in the pewter and red, make it a damn good one, Rashad. That's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And you can become a Locked On Bucs insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding holiday weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.